Good day everyone. Today I want to try something different. But first I would like to introduce the topic of this video. Alters. The units that show a different perspective to already existing characters. Mostly in the form of different facets of their existence. Either by a different point in time, a different fact of their personality, a further part of their personality, or literally an alternative point in time where things could go very differently. So I decided to go with this idea, to see which characters are possible candidates to get an alter form. We will be using TierMaker's tier list to facilitate things for me, mostly because I have no way to remember every character at the top of my head. It lets me set them depending on the probabilities I think they have of becoming an alter in the future. But first, some clarification. To begin with, we're a special case. Amiya. We already know she has a secondary form. However, does not exactly classify her as an alter. Thus, she gets an special tier. Next, we have high possibility that these characters will have an alter further in the game, either because of some information we have gathered through the lore, or because hyperglyphs went and told us said alter will exist. Probable where there is enough data pointing toward the possible alter. Yet the information is not yet there to give us a full picture. Maybe, as the title implies, these are the ones I think may be able to get an alter. However, I lack either the backgrounds or the information to say they will actually get one. So, TLDR, mostly my hopes and dreams. Finally, the ones who already have their alternative form, which also helps to identify the types of alters we might get. With the explanation out of the way, let us start. First off with the Queen of Rap herself, Siege, also known as Verna. As we all know, she is hinted to be royalty in Victoria, and there's also the line referring to a weapon only she can wield, and personally, I don't think she's talking about that hammer. Thus I think she belongs in the high possibility tier, mostly because of the reason just given, and because she will finally get that sword to finish her Seiba cosplay. Next on the list, Granny. At first I think that welfare characters will not be that important in the long run. After all, they are free for a reason. However, in Granny's case, there are two bits of information that make me think she might be able to get an alter in the future: her weapon, and with her being part of the incoming event in Sane. Now, why do I think her weapon counts as a piece of evidence? Simple, it is stated that her spear also doubles as a rifle, yet we have never seen her use it in such a way. Thus I presume we might be able to get a Sniper Granny. However, and because this is mostly a hunch from my part, yet with some information behind it, I think probable is a good spot for her. Next one, Suzuran. I chose Lisa and many other characters in this list for one principal reason. They are children, and sooner or later they will show the time they have spent on the roads. So, as adorable as our light is, I doubt Lisa will stay as a child forever. Thus, I think the possibility of her and other children receiving an alter, or rather, an adult version of themselves. However, this is mostly a hunch with very little information behind it, so I'm afraid she stays in the maybe category. Coming up next, Bison. Same reasons behind Suzuran, because he's so young, and because some things seems to point out at him becoming a more prominent character whenever we reach Midas. After all, his family owns the biggest logistic company in all of Terra. However, there is not much information about him, so to the maybe he goes. Okay. The Sasnan. In the Undertides event, Specter finally showed a sane aspect of her life, telling us how she is not much of a nun, but actually a very sassy individual. So, if Skadi got an alter depending of an alternative timeline, is just to say that Specter might get a similar treatment. However, there is little information about it, so to maybe she goes. Next one. Daddy Rangers. In the old Sabra's case, we have one fact of information that substantiates the possibility of him getting an altered form, mainly the fact that the bow is not his most efficient weapon. Also, the fact being called the Bloody Scimitar already tells us a lot about his skill with the sword. However, and in the very event when this information came out, Rangers himself admits that he is not as capable as he used to be back in the day. So maybe we could get a Guards Ranger, but I doubt it will be that much powerful at his current duration. Maybe a jump from 2 stars to 3 stars. Next, Melanta. She, besides another member of her team, has shown the interest to become stronger and more useful at roads, so I don't think it's weird if she will eventually get an alternative form showing her growth as an operator in roads, just as Lava and Cruz. For the time being, she stays at maybe, but personally I think she could get a little closer to probable. Next one, Vermeil. Our John Connors wannabe does not have much pointed out an alternative form. I chose her mostly because I would like to see her grown up. Infection or not, I hope she can reach adulthood. Next one, Shining. It is widely known that Shining is one of the best swordswomen in all of Terra, a very heavy title. And with the story slowly but surely getting close to Theresis, I personally think that we might get an offensive version of her in the near future. Thus, I leave her at a high possibility. Next one, Texas, Miss Mafioso. In this case, this is mostly because Texas has shown interest to return to Siracusa. However, she hasn't stated why she would like to return. To be part of it once more, or to settle some debts, it's unknown. I think it is quite probable that we will get to see a different aspect of her once we reach that point. In a similar vein, we have Lapi. Laplamp also seems to have a very mysterious past, and if Texas ever gets the chance to shine beyond her actual role, it is quite possible that Lapland could get a similar treatment. However, Lapland is heavily infected, and unlike Texas, there is no proof of her holding back when fighting. So if there is ever a development when we reach Siracusa, there is a possibility for her to get an alter, but I don't think there is much chance of it given her condition. The next one is Lowlight's self-insert. Andreana is said to be an artificial Abyssal hunter made by Iberia. It is also mentioned that she doesn't hold a candle to the original deal, so if we get to a point when we directly interact with Aegir, there could be a chance where her full potential can be unlocked. However, there is nothing pointing at it for the time being, but at the same time, she seems to be a favorite from the creators, so I think the possibility is still there. In a similar vein, Quora. Our beloved Wall has the same probabilities as Andreana, mostly because we don't know what her deal is. If either she was an Abyssal hunter or, like with Mizuki, she is a victim of the church. Whichever the case, there is a possibility of her coming out of her shell. Pun totally intended. Next one is Tina. Given her mental circumstances, link to the video where I discuss about that here, I think that if she ever is to get over her issues and work past them, she might change as an operator, because, let's face it, many people see her as one of the best supporters in the game. However, her trait, which turns her into a glass cannon, makes her very hard to work with, so if there's a future where she works out her problems, she might also get rid of that debilitating fact, and thus becoming a more proper operator in the future. Next one. We all know the meme regarding Mary. How hard she wants to be promoted, yet her dream being denied by the developers. One of the biggest points of evidence is her operator record, where it is shown that she has a very strong drive to get things done, so I don't think that something as the game systems will be enough to hold her back. Thus I think she might be able to get a promotion somewhere in the future. For the time being, she stays at probable. Coming up next, Bubble. I will be honest, it's mostly because of the same. She is young, I want to see her grow up and possibly be happy. Gray, same thing. The sad thing about this one, however, is that if we do get an adult Gray, that would mean he has yet to find his parents. Okay, time to balance things out with Maria. Blemishine is a very useful and fulfilled unit, so how could she get an alter? Well, as shown by Shen, say that 3 times faster. Alter operators might show a different aspect of their lives. Thus, and considering Maria's love for machinery, I think it is possible for her to get an engineer type archetype. You know, like Meyer or Magellan. However, I think this one is just a maybe. Next one, Mir. In this case, we have someone with very little information on her background. There are some bit on side information that points out at a past as an explorer, and seeing how there are many ruins in Terra, it wouldn't be hard to believe that maybe, just maybe, Mir might get to show off that adventurous side of her. Next one, Spot. This one is mostly because of his connections with Sargon, and the fact that he is the son of one of the more influential families there, so it wouldn't be hard to believe that there is a whole part of his life that we have yet to know, but leave it at maybe. Next, Hoshiguma. Our Dorito Spinner has a very interesting point in her files, where Wenju mentions that we have yet to know the real Hoshiguma. Thus I think that maybe we will get an even more offensive version of her. Also, there's the fact that her shield was cut in half, so... Next one, Surtr. The Ice Cream Queen is yet another amnesiac member of Rose. Yet in her case, this is mostly because of the tangled memories given by the sword. I mean, if you read her files, the sword is the source of her memories. If she manages to source them out, maybe we can get a summoner version of her, where she calls upon Leviathan to work for her in the battlefield, without having to worry about keeping her alive. There's also the fact that she is very popular. I doubt Hyperglyph will just let go such a golden opportunity. Next one, Ifrit. Very similar to Surtr, I think there is the possibility of her gaining control over her abilities, either being able to control that entity in her head, or managing to silence it completely. Ifrit has the potential to become one of the more powerful casters in Terra. Not to mention that after Victoria, the most likely course for Rods to go would be Columbia, thus forcing us to face Rhinelaps. Personally, I cannot wait for that part of the story. Next one. The Rats. In a Scavenger case, we have someone who has yet to let go of the past. In a similar case to Istina's, if she ever manages to let go of her past lover, maybe, just maybe, she will be able to become an even better unit in game as well as a more developed individual. And who knows, maybe she will get to fluff that tail. Next one, and I honestly didn't thought she would be in this list at first, Estelle. The reason comes mostly from Vigilio, from the part in which our unknown friend mentions how some members of Rosshammer are looking for the war goddess, who is said to be an Archosaurian with very big horns. And if you look closer to Estelle's horns around her head, they start to resemble the form of a crown, not too different to Amiya's whenever she uses her powers. So I think this is the case of another king roaming around the wastes of Terra, and just because of this setup, I think there is a high possibility for Estelle to become an alter. Next one, the Hungry Toko. In case, we have that alternative ending from her event. There is the possibility of her wanting to reunite with the Kerberos we saw at Side Ending, at the very least pointing out at a connection with Side Ping. Personally, I found it intriguing that there is a pyramid at the background of said event, mostly because that is not just any pyramid, it looks quite similar to Kukulkan's, mostly known in the rest of the world as Quetzalcoatl. Now, why is this important? Well, in Aztec lore, Quetzalcoatl had a very strong familiar / avatar, the dog-like being Suicoatl. So maybe the story behind K is more deeper than just some lost dog. Moving up next, Blue Poison. In Azurio's case, we know she has fight some massive beings around the coasts of Iberia. However, her weapons do not reflect this type of fighting style, so I think that maybe there is a possibility of we getting a Blue Poison with a bigger emphasis on heavy weapons. However, since this is mostly a hunch, she goes into maybe. Next, Jessica. Let's be honest here, we already know she will get an alter. It's just a matter of time. She looks pretty badass though. Next, that is Arya. We all know she is very strong without her shield, once she has decided to go all out. I mean, she did one-shot Jesselton in the jailbreak event. That didn't reflect in gameplay, but in story she still managed to beat him with just one punch. So I think it is very probable for her to get an alternative form in the future. Next one, another OP character in the Laurel list. Mostima. In Blue Exia's case, we have yet to see the whole potential of her power, so a Mostima at 100% will be a sight to behold. Thus why I think she will get an alter in the future. My total devotion for Nana-sama notwithstanding. Next one, Ifrit. With the story going towards Victoria, and her sister being an important part of it, it is more than obvious that we will get the whole picture regarding her and her family. However, there is also the possibility that she will just give a couple of speeches and do nothing more, since she has shown to be very reserved by nature. So I wouldn't be surprised that she does not get an actual alter, but personally I see the possibility, so for the time being, maybe she stays. Coming up next, Yato. In her report it is quietly stated that she is one of the backbones of Rhodes, and she has some whopping 8 years of combat experience, so technically speaking, she is not just anybody with a blade. If anything, it's mostly because of her light sensibility that we haven't seen much of her in the battlefield. If this were ever to be fixed, maybe we can finally see what she is really capable of, as also we might be able to see whatever lies beneath that mask. Next one, Gavial. In this case we know she has very stupid strength, because she was able to block one of the punches of the big ugly thing. You know, the big freaking mech. She stopped it, barehanded. And there's also the fact that she is one of the more beloved characters by the developers, so I think there's a possibility of her getting an alter in the future. Next, Conviction. In their case, we know they might be a deity of some kind just goofing around in the land of mortals. However, and as we have seen with Nyan and her sisters, it is possible that Conviction is just using a very limited form of their true power, so whenever we come back to Minos, there might be a point where we might be able to get a more serious version of this April's Fool character. Hopefully, they might be the ticket for Pallas to become a recognized hero. Next one, Fang, the horse girl with the confusing name. Mostly because 1. The rest of her team has shown how they look like when they will grow up, with the only exception being Hibiscus, but honestly who cares. So it's safe to say that she might get one in the future, mostly so the art does not clash between Beagle, Cruz and herself. Next, Sima. Just like Istina, I think that Sima has a very big potential to become a very strong operator, especially if she works through her trauma and problems. I would love to dive more into this explanation, however, I would like to keep that for the second part of the analysis video. For now, let's just say there's a high possibility of her becoming the second 6-star of her group. Next one. 12F. This time I think there is a possibility, but not that big, mostly because 1. He has amnesia, of course, and 2. He is the developer's proxy, so there is a possibility of him becoming stronger, but I don't think that's needed for the developers to keep talking with us, so maybe he stays. Next one, I'm not even gonna elaborate much. Popukar is a child, I hope she grows up, and I hope she gets to be happy. W. As we saw in the third star set video, something will shock W to the core. Either she will finally get her revenge, she will get some information regarding Teresa, or simply she will lose lunch. I don't know. Whatever it might be, I think that the repercussions of said event could be enough to grant her an alter form. And, you know, money. Finally, the character who inspired me to make this list, Beagle. We already have a skin showing us how her future might be, but also there are hints of pointing at her demise. So then why is she in the list? Well, we will have to go back to Vigilia. To one of the possible answers, we can give Calcit. I am fighting against my destiny. There has been this overlaying theme of fighting against the inevitable. This is mostly seen whenever Nyan talks of the future of her and her siblings reuniting into the ancient god, and her drive to fight said destiny. Again, we can see this in the Dokutah. In very specific cases, there seems to be this recurring theme of them trying to change the future. And what bigger change there could be than to avoid the death of one of our characters? Specifically one that has been stated for a very long time. Thus I think that if said fate gets changed, Beagle has a very high possibility of receiving an alter. Finally, I would like to say that I would love to see grown-up versions of all the children in Rhodes. As stated, I would love to see them grow and be happy. One can only hope. And that's it. This is the list. What do you think? Do you think there are other operators worthy to get an alter? Leave it in the comments below. I would love nothing more but to see what else can we come up with. For now, this is Dokutahblob, wishing you all a great day, and as always, stay healthy everyone.